There's the great Nolan.
Lucan was weak. Now he's dead.
Then he deserved his fate.
I'll kill you for what you did to these people.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This will be my full Invincible Season 2, Episode 4 video. It's the mid-season finale. There's a whole bunch of Easter eggs and references. There is a lot of stuff to cover, and I'll explain what's happening with the second half of the season. So if you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the videos. Careful for spoilers for the episode. If you haven't seen it yet, we'll start at the beginning and work our way through shot by shot, talking about Easter eggs and the many WTF moments. They really wanted to end the first half of the season, like get ready for this break with a strong finish. And they did so, metaphorically and literally, Papa bless. It's a very father-son, cats in the cradle kind of episode. The episode title was It's Been a While, which is a reference to what Omni-Man said at the end of last week's episode and at the beginning of this episode, because this episode basically begins after a quick backstory montage for Omni-Man, right where they ended in last week's episode. Basically, Mark seeing him again on Thraxa, learning the truth about why he brought him here, and it's basically the first time since he left that he's seeing him. Not that much time has gone by. It's been less than a year because the Thraxans live for less than a year. And basically, it brings up all these emotions, this trauma that Mark had been ignoring this whole time. That's part of the reason why he had been burying himself in his work for Cecil in the Global Defense Agency, not only to prove to everyone that he wasn't going to turn out to be another Omni-Man, but also so that he'd be so busy he wouldn't have time to think about everything that happened and how it affected him. So even though they kind of speed run their first father-son chat since the chaos of Season 1, they still do kind of have a talk with each other. They don't really have time to actually sit down and really chat it out though. That'll eventually come. The actual opening scene is basically Omni-Man's backstory, showing what happened to him right after he left the planet in the Season 1 finale. The soundtrack is to Nick Cave's Avalanche. And you can basically see that he flew through the vacuum of space long enough for his beard to grow out, so it's been a while, like it's been a number of weeks that he's just been flying through the vacuum of space. Because they're kind of meant to be a parody of the Kryptonians, like the Superman character, like he's an evil version of Superman, so to speak. His abilities, basically holding his breath while he's in space, flying around through the vacuum, is similar to the way that Superman can fly around in the vacuum of space without a helmet on. But they kind of get into the weeds, like the technicality, the practicality, the whole physics of this later in the episode when Mark almost tries to leave the planet and fly back home. And Omni-Man has to tell him, like, no, dude, there's no way you'd make it home. First, you get lost, and second, you don't know how to hold your breath that long.
Learn to serve me well.
Basically, what they show you during this montage is that Omni-Man would stop off briefly at planets when he needed to recharge his lungs. Like, he couldn't hold his breath indefinitely. But that's basically what is happening, just enabling him to fly from planet to planet that do have atmospheres with air that he can breathe. And remember, there aren't that many habitable planets across the universe. So basically this winds up turning into like a long, dark night of the soul that just lasts for weeks and weeks. And notice how close he gets to the black hole here. It's because he's thinking about killing himself, just letting himself sort of drift in. To answer the follow-up question, like, would a black hole actually be enough to kill a Viltrumite? The answer is yes. Like, you can kill Viltrumites, as he does at the end of this episode, like he winds up killing the other Viltrumite soldiers. It's just very, very, very hard to do that, especially depending on their each individual strength level. Like, not all Viltrumites are created equal. For instance, Thrag is still the most powerful Viltrumite at the moment, even though Invincible himself has the potential to become the most powerful Viltrumite, but that's still a long ways off for him. Basically, he winds up being saved because the Thraxans almost accidentally fall into the gravity well of the black hole. He saves them, and that basically saves his life indirectly. He takes them back, he learns about their race, Thraxa, and they convince him to stay, if only just for a little while at first, to tell them about himself. And the idea is that he starts to find a measure of redemption in ruling over their planet as a benevolent leader, as opposed to the Viltrumites' traditional ways, the way that Thrag rules over the Viltrumites. Way harsher, way more brutal, as evidenced by the Viltrumite soldiers that show up later in the episode.
These insects, you barely touch them, and they die.
Most of their people are like that all the time. Like, they're not even trying to be aggressive. Like, that's just normal attitude for Viltrumites. Thus begins the redemption of Omni-Man. So I've talked about this in previous videos, but the idea is that even though Invincible is called Invincible because it's about the Mark Grayson Invincible character, a big part of the story is also the redemption of Omni-Man. You basically see the beginning of that during this episode. Pretty much all of this storyline on Thraxa is right out of the comics. There were a couple minor changes, like they changed a couple of the Viltrumite characters, but they're all based on the comic book versions of the characters. So when he steps up to him and it seems like they might fight, but then he breaks down and just hugs him like he misses him so much and he just can't hold it in anymore. That's how it went down in the comics. You can tell Omni-Man is kind of tensing up there too, like he's starting to clench, like, oh, we're gonna have a fight here? In his defense, though, even though he seems kind of like a butthole during some of these scenes, the idea is that Omni-Man was raised a certain way to think like these other Viltrumites do from birth, essentially. He's a couple thousand years old in present day right here, even though he seems like a middle-aged man just because of the way that Viltrumites age. And he'd only been on Earth for like the last 20 years, so for like thousands of years, he'd been conditioned to think the way that those other Viltrumites think. It's only recently that his time on Earth has caused him to change his stance and caused him to think a different way. They kind of get into this later in the episode when Art is talking to Debbie about why Invincible also turned out so good because of her influence. I'll talk about that when we get to that part of the episode because it confirmed a couple of my fan theories. When he references Omni-Man knocking his teeth out before, Viltrumites are capable of healing from that kind of damage, like, basically fixing his teeth, whereas normal adults cannot regrow teeth. It explains how they can get beaten within an inch of their lives, then rebound super quick. Like Omni-Man seems like he gets his spine broken in this episode, which would kill a normal person, but because he's a Viltrumite, he's so strong, he can't heal that. That doesn't make them absolutely unkillable or invincible, just very, very hard to kill. Omni-Man then explains how he became Emperor of the Thraxans. Basically, the custom on the Thraxan planet is that the oldest member of their race becomes their leader, but in any given time, they only live for about a year, their leader would die pretty quickly. So when Omni-Man comes along and they see that he doesn't die, like he just lives forever, and he has superpowers, he's like the clear choice for them. They're like, please, become our leader. So he's trying to explain to Mark that there was no fight. Like, no. They actually have a really good relationship with me and I with them. They asked me nicely to become their leader, and I'm trying to rule them in a benevolent kind of way. He meets his new Thraxan wife, who's a totally nice person, and notice Mark's face when he says that he can never return home to Earth. He actually looks disappointed, as if for a hot second, like even though he was super mad about what happened during the events of Season 1, he was hoping, just a small part of him was hoping, that he might come back at some point. Then they introduce him to his younger half-brother, Oliver.
This is your little brother.
You gotta be.
Real big WTF moment, and I love the way they do the title treatment too. Like they do the title trope, but this time the sentence sounds a little bit weird, like it rolls off the tongue a little bit weird. Basically dropping the Invincible title with a pause while he's in the middle of dropping an F-bomb. They start to explain some of the logic behind his little brother Oliver and his Thraxan half with his Viltrumite half and how he's aging a little bit faster. The whole idea is that his abilities will be about the same as Invincible's abilities once he matures, but because of his Thraxan half, he won't become nearly as old, like he'll still age relatively faster. Typically though with Thraxans, they mature very, very fast. So that's why even though he was only born a couple months ago, he'll age to maturity and get his powers way faster than Mark did. Once he does reach maturity, though, then his aging will start to slow down. I think the idea is that these Thraxan Viltrumite half-breeds will only live for up to like a couple hundred years, whereas say like Mark, who's half-human in Viltrumite, will live for potentially thousands and thousands of years. Full-blooded Viltrumites like Omni-Man, though, could theoretically live for hundreds of thousands of years, but the reason why nobody's actually been able to test this theory is because the Scourge virus almost wiped out their entire race. Otherwise, you might actually see some Viltrumites out there that are really, really getting up there in age. They jump back to Debbie on Earth. She's still walking aimlessly around town after her encounter with Alana's husband. It's meant to be a parallel for the walkabout that Omni-Man just went on, so to speak, more like a flyabout through the cosmos. Just like Omni-Man, she also thinks about killing herself, almost jumping off the overpass. She's basically hit rock bottom in the same way that he did. Part of the reason for paralleling their arc, like showing this scene for her, is because eventually they will meet again. The two of them will meet again. So they want to show that by that point, they both gotten to a better place mentally and emotionally by the time that happens. But it's still a long ways off. She visits his fake tombstone at the cemetery, and when she asks why he bothered marrying her, there were actually two reasons. At first, she was just the first person who he met that basically fit the criteria that the mission Thrag gave to him: infiltrate the local populace, sire a half-breed Viltrumite with them, then use them to take over the planet. But remember, he was with her for a couple of years before Invincible was born. So the idea is that over those first couple of years, they actually fell in love, and that's why they got married. Like, he actually did love her, and her influence actually was very positive on him, and part of the reason why he wasn't able to kill Invincible at the end of Season 1. Later in the episode, when he complains to Mark, "Why am I having these feelings? I'm Viltrumite, I'm not supposed to feel this way," it's because of the positive influence of Debbie on him. It's kind of the same situation with Superman and Lois Lane. Lois Lane is meant to be his tie to humanity, basically. They kind of got into this during the Justice League Snyder Cut, where Lois Lane dies and Superman falls prey to Darkseid in the anti-life equation, turning into like the evil version of Superman. It's meant to show you basically what could happen to Superman if Lois Lane were not around. So the whole idea, though, is that Omni-Man did love her, kind of still does love her, but she doesn't know that at this point. They mentioned this in the episode. The reason why he called her a pet was basically so that it would make it easier for him to take over the planet, because if he started thinking of her as his wife, as the person that he loved, it'd be harder for him to do that. So when he was saying all those terrible things during season 1, that was basically just to make himself forget about all these feelings that he had for Earth and his family. By the end of this episode, he's kind of embracing those feelings. Like I said, the redemption of Omni-Man, he's letting himself feel all of the feelings. Then we go back to the Maulers because there's another clone now. They have a joke about which one is the clone, this time being the first time that they know exactly who is the clone and who's the original, because the original has half of his body almost burned off. They use this for like a comedy runner during the episode, with them just kind of joking back and forth about who's subservient and who's the master, because they got into that during season 1, but the whole idea is their dynamic is usually that neither one knows who the original is, so neither one ever feels truly superior to the other one. And that's meant to keep them in check, keep them from killing each other, so to speak. They introduced the Donald storyline, who's trying to visit Debbie, trying to figure out why she was acting so weird the other day. That's also a bit of a runner during the episode too, where he starts to finally figure out what's really going on with him. And they basically give you all the answers that you need. If you haven't figured out, don't worry, we'll talk about that in a second, because it's a big WTF moment at the end of the episode. But here he finds his glasses in the rubble, starting to put the pieces together. The whole idea is that he doesn't have the memories of when he died. Back at the university, Amber and William joke about cutting class and wasting money because it costs a fortune to pay for college, so if you're skipping class, you're basically burning money. Hindsight being 2020, I also agree with Amber. When I was actually going to college, though, I would have also been the same way as William, not really thinking about the actual cost. I had been lucky enough to get a 4-year scholarship that covered almost all of my tuition, not everything, but it did make college super cheap. But I was super lucky, because I think nowadays it's up to like $60,000, almost $70,000 per year just to go to college, and that's just like a regular college. Adam Eve visits looking for Mark, who hasn't been answering his texts because, as they explain, he's on the mission to Thraxa, even though they don't know that it's secretly Omni-Man that tricked him to coming to Thraxa. Amber says it's been about a week. That's because it took him almost 6 days just to get there, and he just got there. They also use this scene to show you how close Adam Eve is getting to Mark, how their relationship is slowly developing in the background. The two of them are alike in that they both have super messed up home lives and super tragic origin stories, so they kind of bond over that. If you haven't seen it, I did like a full breakdown Easter eggs video for that Adam Eve prequel episode. I'll post a link for it down in the description below, because it's a great episode, but it is super messed up. They revealed the place that Adam Eve keeps in the city on the DL is really just the teen team's old lair. Invincible actually visit there during season 1. Then back on Thraxa, Mark tries to wrap his head around the existence of Oliver, basically paying off Omni-Man's threat from season 1, where he basically said all he had to do was kill Mark and then just go sire another son and wait another 17 years and I'll just make another one. Turns out it took way less time than 17 years. Then Omni-Man basically explains why Oliver needs Mark's protection, because the Viltrumites have special rules about who they can interbreed with, and they'll view Oliver as substandard. So even though right now, Thrag, the other Viltrumites, their army would view Oliver as an abomination, that's gonna change, so set your clocks for that, just remember that in the background. They'll turn a big 180 on that interbreeding policy. Remember, the Thraxans grow to maturity super fast, so if you were a Viltrumite and you wanted to create a Viltrumite army super quickly, they'd actually be a really easy way to do that. Easy bake oven Viltrumite army. So Omni-Man asks for Invincible's help in killing the other Viltrumites and making the fight a little more even. It's meant to also pay off Thetis' comments from last week, where he was wondering if having both Omni-Man and Invincible working with the Coalition of Planets would be enough to stand against the Viltrumite Empire, like not just one, but 2 Viltrumites working with us. The whole battle that goes down in this episode is kind of like a template, a preview for what the final battle between them and Thrag is going to look like at the end of the show eventually. Like, if you thought that this was a crazy battle, like a lot of WTF moments, just imagine how much bigger it's going to get when there are a bunch of Viltrumites involved. A taste of things to come. Then, of course, the episode isn't that long. The minute that he agrees to train with Omni-Man to learn how to fight better, the Viltrumites show up. Like, oh, nope, no time for that, we gotta fight. Then back at the Teen Team's lair, Adam Eve finds Kill Cannon trying to steal tech that Robot left when they went to the Guardians of the Globe. Then back on Thraxa, all the stuff is from the comics. Invincible arriving at the caves of Roclane. Their people use the caves as a shelter during periodic massive lightning storms that went back to their ancestors. But part of the joke is their lifespans are so short, they've been through so many generations, it was so long ago, they don't remember why the caves are called Roclane, like we don't know who Roclane was. Then if it wasn't clear, this Viltrumite soldier Lucan comes to the caves actually looking for Invincible to fight him. That's why he explains the whole logic of how this is going to work. Like, if you survive our fight, if you fight well, you'll be allowed to enter the Viltrumite army. It's not until he shows up and they get ready to start their fight that he actually notices that Oliver is there and he's like, wait a minute, there's another son that he sired. Then tries to kill them both, basically. Invincible isn't quite the match for him, but Omni-Man shows up and ends things pretty quickly. They're pretty evenly matched, but the whole idea is that Omni-Man is older than Lucan and more experienced fighter, and that's why he's able to end the fight much quicker. But the fight is another good example of how hard it is to actually kill Viltrumites. Like, it seems like he's pretty dead, but nope, he is not dead. Adam Eve makes fun of Kill Cannon using more tropes, like his one thing is just using his arm cannon to shoot stuff even though it's been powered up extra because of whatever Robot was using in that device. Their fight winds up turning into another reminder about her thinking of collateral damage and the well-being of bystanders, almost getting a couple people killed while trying to fight Kill Cannon. Even though her father totally sucks butt, he wasn't wrong about superheroes mostly just thinking of themselves, their fights, whatever they're doing at any given moment, and not about the issue of collateral damage. Then Mark Hamill comes back as Art. If you didn't realize, Mark Hamill does the voice of Art here, coming to visit Debbie, basically talk her through their shared trauma, and give her the pep talk that she's been needing for a while, that she was strong enough on her own to make it through all this, and for the most part, she raised Mark by herself because Omni-Man was always off fighting some other big adventure. Thank you very much to Luke Skywalker for the sage wisdom. Art also confirms one of my theories I've had for a while. So when Angstrom Levy said that this main universe version of Invincible was actually an anomaly in the multiverse because the vast majority of the other versions of Invincible across the multiverse turned evil, joining Omni-Man to take over their planets. So Art is basically confirming my theory that it was actually his mother's influence on him in this universe that prevented that from happening, and for whatever reason in these other universes, his mother was just never around when he was growing up. Either she was dead or Omni-Man killed her after he was born. And like I said, at the end of the episode when Omni-Man talks about his redemption, like, why am I feeling all these feelings? Why do I care about these people? It's because of the positive influence of Debbie on him. Back at the Global Defense Agency, Donald finally learns what's been going on, why everyone's acting so weird around him. He's essentially a cyborg created by Cecil, using the memories and consciousness from the original Donald, kind of a similar backup situation tech that the Maulers use in preserving their consciousness by just putting that in new bodies. And even though they're not super explicit about what's happening, what he's seeing in the bathroom, when the knife bends when he stabs himself, essentially it's him realizing that he's a cyborg and he has the metal parts underneath his skin. That's why the knife bent. And it's why he has no memory of blowing himself up, because Cecil basically just took the backup copy and put it in a new body. And the backup was made before the explosion. Back on Thraxa, Omni-Man and Invincible fight the other two Viltrumites, Vidor and Thula. Thula's kind of like a parody of Ursa from the DC comics, like Ursa, Non, and Zod.
He actually cares for these Earth people.
Like pets.
She's also voiced by Grey Delisle, who's also mostly known for doing the voice of Azula back in the day. She's done a million other voices too, but she is giving off some Azula energy. Notice how she's grown her hair into a ponytail and woven a blade to the end of it, using it as an extra weapon in combat. That's how badass a fighter she is. And because Viltrumites are so strong, it's basically like choking Mark out with super strong rope. The visor here also gives him some Eradicator vibes too, because we're talking about Superman, Kryptonian parodies here with the Viltrumites. Omni-Man tries to make Mark realize that unless he goes no holds barred and tries to kill the Viltrumites, they will kill him, like kill or be killed, which is very much a Viltrumite way of thinking. But the whole idea here is it's Mark's morality sort of kicking in and saying like, no, I do not kill people. That's not me. Even though for a hot second, it seems like he does relent and try to actually start killing her. They want to show you that there's always a chance that he could lose it and start acting more like Omni-Man. But the whole idea is that the positive influence of his friends like Adam Eve, his mother, everybody else, keep him from doing that most of the time. They're basically the people that humanize him. They have a crazy WTF montage of all of them just wrecking each other. Omni-Man almost ends the fight with the two Viltrumites almost being dead, maybe not quite, but pretty dead, until Lucan seemingly breaks his spine with a surprise attack, carrying his own guts with him all the way from the cave. Like, that's how hard it is to kill Viltrumites. He calls the Viltrumite army to basically come in and pick up Omni-Man, take him into custody. Then they go back to their home to reference the books that he wrote under the pseudonym Nolan under his real-life persona to set up that twist at the end of the episode 2, where he basically tells Invincible, read my books, as in there's secrets about the true history of the Viltrumites in those books. Also, this book, Savage Planet Savage Beast, is a meta-reference to their adventure this week on Thraxa as well. Debbie giving Nolan's money from the books to charity is also them taking a step further away from Cecil and the Guardians of the Globe. Like there's a wedge between Cecil and Invincible that's slowly growing. That will continue to get worse. It's part of the reason why Cecil continues developing all those contingency plans for killing Viltrumites, and they're getting better every day. The baseball gloves are also a reminder that she's the one that helped play catch with Mark when he was a kid because Omni-Man was always away so much, and when they get back, like when Invincible gets back with Oliver, they'll use it to play catch with the two of them, because the whole idea is that he'll have to take Oliver back to Earth to keep him safe now that the Viltrumites have Omni-Man in custody and they're letting Mark go free because he survived the battle. So the whole idea is that he feels like he can't leave Oliver on Thraxa now at the mercy of the Viltrumites because they know of his existence. Also the idea that the positive influence of his mother, like this whole family life on Earth, helped Invincible become a good person. He'll probably hope that the same thing will happen with Oliver too. When Omni-Man tells him to read his books, I think he picks up on the message, like his eye twitches a little bit, like he kind of realizes what he's actually saying to him as the Viltrumites cart him away to be executed. Like the whole idea is that he wrote these books to earn money while he was on planet Earth under the fake Nolan identity, but he used his own true history, the history of the Viltrumites, passing it off as science fiction. So essentially it's like secret code for Mark to learn on how to kill Viltrumites. The Invincible Gun book is a reference on how to kill Viltrumites, probably some details on the Scourge virus too. Then Adam Eve, in the wake of almost getting those bystanders killed, goes back to her parents' house to try and make amends with them, just kind of deal with things in general. And General Krieg of the Viltrumite army shows up as they're carting Omni-Man off and the dead bodies of the other Viltrumites, and he's voiced by Clancy Brown, probably sounded familiar. He was also just on The Boys Gen V TV show, is sort of like an evil version of Professor X. He tells Mark that he's part of the Viltrumite army now, whether he likes it or not, and has to take up Omni-Man's original mission, preparing Earth for their eventual takeover, or else they'll come in force and kill millions of people. Basically putting a ticking clock on the Viltrumite invasion of Earth, like a much faster ticking clock than was before. During the post-credit scene, the Mauler twins have more jokes about the original forcing the new clone to refer to him as the king, basically wait on him hand and foot, say he's going to create an army of clones, like why have one when I could have many, then promptly gets killed by the brand new clone. And when he says sometimes things are the way they are for a good reason, he's talking about why there's only ever two of them at any given time, the rule of Sith, the rule of two. Because otherwise the Maulers would start their own little civil war. If there were a bunch of them, nothing would ever get done because they'd always be fighting each other for supremacy. Presumably right after this moment, he's going to create another clone, and this time, because they'll look identical, neither one will know truly who's the original and who's the brand new one, so neither one will feel truly superior to the other, and they'll start working like they used to work together. There was a whole bunch of stuff that happened in the episode, a whole bunch of Easter eggs and references from the comics, so if there's anything you spotted that I didn't talk about during the video or any Easter eggs or references, just write it below in the comments. But what's going to happen now is that episode 5, like the rest of the season, the rest of the 4 episodes, will air early next year. They haven't said exactly when that's going to be yet. But the whole idea is that right after this, Mark is going to have to take Oliver back to Earth, start preparing Earth for the Viltrumite army to show up, like all of his friends, Adam Eve, everybody else, Cecil, the Guardians of the Globe. If we're talking about more Viltrumites coming to check on them, like he said, we will come check on you soon, he's mostly talking about Anissa and eventually Conquest, but Anissa is the first one to show up. We might get some teasers for her at the end of Season 2 or sometime during Season 3. It's still like a little while. There's a lot that happens before Anissa shows up. But when she does, there is a bunch of messed up stuff that goes down. Don't worry, there will be a lot that we will talk about when she actually shows up on the show. There are a couple other Invincible videos that I'm working on, so be sure to enable alerts for my channel so you don't miss those. There's a bunch of big stuff coming up too. The next big animated series that'll be happening will be What If. That'll basically be at the end of the year. Click here for my What If Season 2 trailer video, and click here for all my Invincible videos. Thank you so much for watching, everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.